Hello and welcome to my class skill tier list. So each class has its own mastery skill at level 5 and beyond. So I'm going to be rating these. These are in no particular order. I've rearranged them based on the order of the reference I'm using. So to begin, we have Alfred's Avenir class, Golden Lotus ability. During combat, may prevent 50% of physical damage taken, and trigger percent equals dex. So this is like a dex trigger tanking ability. I'm going to say this is okay. I don't think this is going to be one of the better abilities in here. Taking less damage is nice, but having it happen on like a 20 to maybe 30% trigger rate is not too reliable. Alfred is definitely one of the weaker units in the game. His unique class generally has worse stats than Paladin. I think even worse defensive stats. It might have higher defensive stats, but definitely has lower strength. And overall, he's not that strong of a unit, so I'd say it's just okay. Smash Plus on Berserker, I would say, is actually kind of bad. So essentially, when making a smash attack, when smashing the enemy, you move them 2 spaces instead of 1. Now, this can allow for easier breaking. So if you smash something into another unit or a wall, it will break that enemy, which can be useful, but if you're using a smash weapon, it's going to hit hard anyways and probably either one-shot the enemy or you're going to be taking damage while attacking it, kind of defeating the purpose of breaking it. So it's not really that useful. If you could ring out enemies, that would, we'd be talking, maybe that'd be something different, but that's not the case. So Berserker's Smash Plus, also Berserker has low dex cap and most people don't run it for that reason, which is a pretty good reason. So I'd say it's pretty bad. Bow Knight, Careful Aim. If unit initiates combat without moving first, grants hit plus 40 during combat. So this is basically if you are sitting there, enemies are approaching you, and then you attack them, right? You position the Bow Knight so it's within range of incoming enemies so that it can shoot them to take advantage of this. This, I would say, is okay. It's not super useful for player phase attacking, but it's used on player phase, but what I mean is you can't dive or be aggressive with this. This is more of a defensive thing. If it just gave you hit plus 40 while using a bow or hit plus 20 while using a bow, it would be strong, but because it's so situational and it's very restricting, I would say it's not that good. It's just decent. It's just okay. So, and also Bow Knight, some people have been running it and have had some success with it. But I don't think, if you're running Bow Knight, I think you'd just be mostly shooting things down. You wouldn't really be setting this up. Now, you could, and it would help. The only thing it would really help with, Wyverns you can usually hit. The only thing that you have a hard time hitting on Bow Knight, or on, bows in general, are Griffin Knights. So really, it would just help with killing Griffin Knights, specifically. But you could just use Accuracy Engravings, or Excalibur. There's different ways of dealing with Griffin Knights. So for that reason, I would just say it's okay. Now, if you can make use of this consistently, it's decent, but most maps don't have Griffin Knights. So when you don't have enemy flyers to shoot down, or when there's very few enemy flyers to shoot down, or when the accuracy doesn't matter, it's not going to be that relevant. All right, Cupido, back at you. When countering, may deal extra damage, and it's equal to half of damage taken. Trigger percent equals dex. So you have to get hit. I'm going to say this is lower end of okay. It's definitely not bad because you're probably going to be getting hit in the game, with Vigato. Or you could set it up so that he hits something, counterattacks. This is just extra chip damage when you get hit. I don't like it because you have to get hit for it to trigger. I'd rather it be you attack something than maybe get damage like Luna. I think that's just way better. But it's not bad. It's not D tier. It's definitely at least reasonably okay. All right, Special Dance. This is OP. If unit uses Dance, grants Dex/Speed/Luck plus 3 to target for 1 turn. This is one of the many aspects of Sadal that makes him arguably the best unit in the game. Being able to boost hit rate, speed, and mitigate crits, because Luck plus 3 is crit minus 3 essentially. Dex plus 3 is hit plus 6, I believe, and Speed plus 3 is more doubling. And also, he scales Dex trigger abilities like Sandstorm and Luna, and Ignis and Void Grasp, so pretty crazy, pretty overpowered. All right, Divine Spirit. So this is Allier's. On Allier's unique class, units engage meter is shortened by 1 step. I would say this is strong. I personally don't run dragon-based Alir, but it's definitely not a bad ability, and reducing the amount of meters you need to fill, the amount of bars you need to fill your meter is good. So if you ran something like a Brave Sword on Alir, you know, you have significantly, well, not significantly, but one fewer steps. So if you quad something and kill it, I believe that's at least 4, potentially 5. I think you get an extra one for killing. And I know in enemy phase, if you get attacked, if you get hit, I think you get a meter, and then if you counterattack, you get a meter. So you could quickly fill Engage, like if you ran like Brave Sword on Alir, for example. But just using this in general, you're looking at average more engages, so that's definitely nice. Fell Spirits, this is on Veil. At the start of each turn, unit's engage meter is filled by 1. So on fast maps, where you don't have that much time, I would say this is good. So here's a few things about this one. The first one is when you are engaged, you have 3 to 4 turns where you can't fill meter, right? So this is one of the ones that sounds good in theory, but in practice isn't that good, because when you pop and engage, you stay engaged for 3 to 4 turns. So let's say you beat a map in like 10 to 20 turns, right? And you pop engage like, I don't know, turn 1, just for the sake of argument. So then by turn 5, you can engage again, and then Fell Spirit starts working. So it'll take you so many turns. Like, it'll help you fill your engage meter faster, but I don't think it's going to make you hyper aggressive. Like, Veil has pretty low speed, so you kind of have to speed fix her. Now, what would be better is just putting her on Sage and just using Nova or even Mage Knight. I don't know that she can use Nova on Mage Knight. I think she can, but on Sage she definitely can. And what you would be doing is just quadding, and that would build up meter faster than her default class. Sage has higher build and magic, I believe. And speed. Alternatively, if Mage Knight can use Nova, that would be much faster, so that would build it up. Like, just quadding with Nova would build it up faster. And Chaos Style, in my opinion, would be better than this. It's okay. It's not bad. It's just decent. Well, I'd say it's good, like somewhat good. It depends on the pace of the map. The thing is, you get Veil endgame, and a lot of the endgame maps are very fast-paced. So when things are fast-paced, you don't have time to just sit around and wait for things to fill. So this would just be kind of helping you a little bit over the grand scheme of things, but it's free. And if you don't want to reclass Veil, it's not bad. So I would say it's good. It's okay. I keep like... not the C tier definition of okay. All right, Swap. General, used to switch places with an adjacent ally. This, I would say, is, like, okay. Switching places isn't bad. It can be useful for repositioning something to accelerate its position, to get it into safety, to allow it to dive more effectively. You are spending a turn to do this, so it's not the best use of a turn, in my opinion, but it's nice utility. So I'd just say it's decent. It's potentially even good, but I don't think General is that good of a class to begin with. I think there are better options for tanking. Like Heroes tend to be decent tanks. Like Gold Mary on Hero is actually pretty tanky. Tamara on her Picket is pretty tanky. There's other tanks that aren't General that are, in my opinion, much better. Allied Defense, Great Knight. If unit is between ally and foe, reduces damage to unit by 3. All right, so I actually got this one wrong in a previous video. So essentially, if you are sandwiched in between an enemy and an ally, you, the Great Knight, take 3 less damage, which is nice. And Great Knight does have higher res. I would say this is like low B tier. Great Knight is actually not a bad class. It has much better speed than General and obviously more mobility. It does have armor and horse weakness though, but it is possible to get a Great Knight doubling, unlike a General, which is very difficult to do. And it does have better res. So you combine that with allied defense, and you have a more bruisery horse, off tank instead of a General, which is trying to be like this main tank, but it's terrible at fighting mages. Great Knight is a little bit better at fighting mages, and with allied defense, even more so. And if you throw it on a unit like Louis, if you get his passive to trigger, you're looking at -5 damage if positioned correctly. And then if you run something like Gentility on him, you're looking at -8 damage from all sources. And that's some pretty good tanking. So it's These damage reduction abilities are pretty good. The condition can be, maybe a little difficult to meet consistently in some cases, because like you have to work off of an ally's position, so you have to like set up that position. So if you're diving or fighting a bunch of things and your positioning is kind of crazy and all over the place, it might not be super consistent to pull off, but it seems that you could reasonably pull it off on most turns as needed, especially when you're pulling and tanking. All right, clear the way, Griffin Knight. Units, space, and adjacent spaces have a movement cost of 1 for allies. So this allows you to have allies move through woods, through water, through fire, through movement impeding tiles. And weirdly enough, though, it does not fix quicksand debuff, which you would think it does, but it doesn't. However, I do believe it allows you to move through water tiles on the few maps where those are a thing. So I would say it's good. I would say it's like middle B tier. It's definitely not the best thing, and there's not even that many maps that have these movement impeding tiles. What would be cooler, in my opinion, is if it allowed your units to cross over but not stand in impassive or like flyer only tiles. So for example, if there was like water, if you could put a clear the way and then have your units move through the Griffin Knight over water tiles that they can't cross normally, that would be cool. Or just like tiles that flyers can access in general, but then they can't stay on there, they can only move over them. That would be interesting. Then it would be like S tier, but in its current form, it's just like kind of neat sometimes. Pincer attack, Halberdier. I would say this is high A tier. I don't want to put it in S tier because it has the setup requirement. Outside of the setup requirement, it can be very good. Personally, I think there are better classes than Halberdier. I think what Halberdier brings to the table is usually kind of like a bad wyvern in a way, where you don't have the mobility, you don't have like the hero brave assist, you don't have warrior. Sorry, so if we're comparing it to other backups, I would say warrior or hero is better. Hero for backup spam and a little bit of tanking. Warrior for the bow axis and the axe damage. For other classes, like as a damage unit, comparing it to like wyverns or paladins or mage knights, I would say all of those are much better damage units. They're more consistent, they're more reliable. You don't have to have a dude wrapped around enemies, which can be awkward to set up at times. So it's still strong, but it's definitely not overpowered. If it had less setup, I would say it's overpowered. But the other thing too is units that are good on Halberdier tend to also be good on other classes that are better. So that's another thing to point out. Brave assist. I would say it's either high A or low S. The argument for high A is that it can be difficult to maintain. It's good, but it can be difficult to maintain max health, right? So if your hero is attacking enemies, most enemies have 1 to 2 range weapons in general. So if you're attacking something, you're probably getting hit. If you're getting hit, you're not at max health. So that's the argument against it being an A tier. But when it works, it's good. The argument for S tier would be when you run dual assist plus, which you can reasonably get earlier on. Your units can easily be at full health before they even initiate an attack. So if you trigger dual assist plus, you get the brave assist at range before they even strike. So this allows your non-hero units to smack things and get tons of bonus damage. And then your heroes can actually start rolling in, and then as they take damage, they can be patched up, after they hit things, but you would open with other units and make use of dual assist. So those are the arguments for both A and S tier. I'd say it's kind of like here. It's like somewhere in between here, but I'll just put it in high A for now because it requires a lot of setup in order for it to be S, in my opinion. Self-healing High Priest. I'd say this is bad. I don't see the point in it. I mean, I get it. You get XP for healing yourself instead of using a Vulnerary. I don't think High Priest is that good of a class in general. I don't think it's a good ability. I mean, it's definitely better than this, so it's not the worst ability. But I don't think High Priest is a good class. I don't like self-healing. I don't see the point. You can just use a Vulnerary. Another healer can heal you. You're going to have multiple staff units, generally. But yeah, it's whatever. Lindworm, Grasping Void. I would say this is S tier. It's free damage. So here's the thing. With Lindworm, As long as you fix Ivy's speed, she will double consistently. And she can double consistently with Bolganone. And she can also quad in some cases with Nova. So when you're quadding with Nova, even if you only have like 20 to 30 decks, this thing triggers a lot. And if you also do things like bonded shield strats, where you just have Ivy sit next to a bond shield unit and she has high enough speed from, speed taker or just speed increases, this will trigger, during enemy phase. So if she gets attacked by 10 enemies and kills like most of them or all of them, this will be triggering constantly. So there's a lot of situations where this triggers. And even if the enemy has low magic, it still gives extra damage. The extra damage is half of the foe's magic as well, so it's pretty substantial. And even without this, Ivy's still strong, but this does give her, on average, better damage over time. So, and especially with Nova. With Nova, it's actually crazy how good it can be. So it's definitely one of the better. Because Ivy's a good unit with little investment. So I'd say this is pretty strong. All right, Chaos Style. I would say this is S tier. Mage Knight is one of the better magic classes, if not the best magic class. And Chaos Style just gives you generally 3 plus 3 speed for free. So the way it works is if you hit a physical enemy and you have magic, you get plus 3 speed. If you hit a magic enemy and you have physical, you get plus 3 speed. So Mage Knight, if it has decent strength, can whack mages with like a physical weapon and also get Chaos Style. Or its average use case of hitting physical with magic, it's getting plus 3 speed with magic. So Mage Knight also has one more build than Sage, and I believe plus 2 base speed. So you're looking at plus 6 speed versus Sage. That's a lot of speed. And Mage Knight is a very solid class with few weaknesses that generally destroys things. And it's potentially one of the best classes in the game, as far as I can tell. Martial Master, Diffuse Healing. When unit is healed by a staff, all adjacent allies also get 50% HP. Honestly, my opinion on this one has changed. I'm going to put this in low end of, well, maybe mid good. So if you run a Martial Master and they are a Lucina Bonded Shield user and they get hit or they're missing health and you heal them, you're healing all of your bond targets, which is nice. Or in general, if you just position this, you can get AoE healing for free constantly. So this actually isn't bad, assuming you're running that utility. So yeah, I think that's actually decent. It's better than self-heal. Because the thing with self-heal is the only use case for it really is for XP. I couldn't see it being useful otherwise. Because, you can use vulnaries, so it's basically the same thing. Maybe just for inventory compression, it's kind of nice, but I don't think this class... Hortensia is the best staff user in the game, so why would you run this? Alright, pivot. Paladin. Aladdin. No, it's Paladin. Alright, use to move to opposite side of adjacent ally. I would say this is low end good. It's just repositioning stuff. You can just move around. So if you move your max distance to an ally and then pivot, you've effectively moved an extra 2 tiles. So it's kind of nice. It also allows you to do some shenanigans with, diving and stuff like that and repositioning. So pretty good utility. Maybe better than these though. Maybe here. All right, Sandstorm, pick it. I don't think it's OP because you need to build Tamara up. I would say it's here. You need to build up Tamara to trigger it consistently off of a Brave Lance, and you can also enemy phase tank with a Javelin, and as long as her speed is high enough, she'll double on enemy phase and can tank a bunch of things like Ike or something, or potentially Roy, maybe even Leaf. And this will allow you to trigger Sandstorms on enemy phase. Or if you bond shield her, she could also trigger it on enemy phase. There's definitely more consistent things to use. I would say its best use case is either diving with Brave Lance to quad to trigger Sandstorm, which can be very reliable, or just, her being an off tank, holding a front, fighting 2 to 3 enemies, counterattacking at 1 to 2 range and triggering that on enemy phase, and it's pretty decent. When it triggers, it usually hits harder than when she crits, once you get her defense up, which happens naturally, so it's pretty strong. Reforge, Royal Knight. So if unit's HP is 10%, 11 or more, and adjacent ally is broken after combat, sacrifice 10 HP and remove break status from the ally. So this is a break fix ability. and it costs 10 HP as long as you have 10 HP to give. It's on Royal Knights. Some people like Royal Knights. I think it's like an okay class. I would say this is like here. It could be situationally useful, like situationally good, and you have control over how it works by positioning, unlike some of these abilities which are like kind of random, and the randomness isn't really good like these are. So I would say it's an okay utility, like a decent, maybe like high C tier. High C. All right. Spell Harmony Sage. So essentially plus 1 damage per tome user adjacent to you. I would say this is like good. It's definitely not as good as Chaos Style, but if you have your tome users hanging out, it can be decent. It does force you to kind of ball them up, which can be annoying, so otherwise I'd put it higher. But extra damage with an easy to beat condition is not bad. It's not strong because of the fact that they have to be adjacent, but still something. World Tree. When unit uses a staff, may not consume a use, trigger percent equals dex. All right, so this is Hortensia's unique class. Before the Well update, I would say it's S tier, but after the Well update, I'd just say it's high A tier. Being able to conserve... Actually, no, maybe there is an argument for it to be S tier, because I have an anecdote. Now, this is an anecdote, but this is still a thing that happened. I was on chapter 22 on a playthrough that I had no obstruct staves on for no reason. Like, I just forgot to buy them, and I had no... Like, the only chain guard I had was Sadal, and it was one of the most difficult chapter 22s I've had. My team comp was really weird. I had no good passives. This was before the Well, and I didn't have obstruct. I didn't have a lot of things. So what I did have was a 3-use entrap, and this triggered like 5 times. And I entrapped like 8 or like 6 to 7 enemies. So this thing can randomly pop off in a huge way. But on average, it's like high A tier, maybe low S. So I think this is still fair. Just saving trap uses, rescue uses, warp uses. This will save you a ton of money. Those are very expensive staves. So definitely worth it to run. And also for like high level play, like, you know, warp, rewarp combos and, you know, being hyper aggressive, it enables it. No distractions. So sniper class grants crit plus 10. Oh, there's no weapon insight on here, I'm just realizing, but I think it's in here. Where's weapon insight? Yeah, this particular one has a lot of things in it. I'll look for it, but I think it's not in this list. Yeah, I'll pull it up in a second. All right, we'll finish this though. All right, no distractions. Crit plus 10 when the foe can't counter. This is snipers. Oh, I'm sorry, that's a personal skill. That's not a class skill. All right, that's my bad. All right, so crit plus 10 when they can't counter. On a crit build, this could be good. So like a killer, like on a unit who has decent strength, and not even like really high strength, just decent strength. Combining this with a unit who has naturally good dex, which sniper does give you plus 30 dex growth, and like a crit build, like a killer bow with a crit engraving, you're looking at pretty, you know, consistent 70 to 80% crit rates. So that could be pretty strong. If you also ran Wrath and just were missing like 10 health or so, 10 to 20 health, you could be consistently critting, and this will help push you into 100% crit rates. So this could be good, potentially even strong. So sniper might be a little bit better than we realize, but it also might not be. All right. Soul Successor. Unit may recover 50% of damage dealt. Trigger percent equals dex. This one I would say is just good. Like here. It's not... So the thing is you have to run Diamant, and some people really like him. A lot of people don't really care for him. Personally, every time I've tried to run him, he doesn't really pop off in any meaningful way. And I feel like he's competing with Avenir for a good engraved, like upgraded sword. So I don't like to just dump good resources onto units that are basically trying to replace a force deploy. So for that reason, I usually don't run him. But it's not like the worst ability. It's something. It's random. It's random healing. It can be decent. It also works on enemy phase, so it could be good. But I would say it's at least like good. You know, B tier, like middle of B tier. Swordmaster, run through. Used to attack an adjacent foe, then move to the opposite space, or the space opposite of that foe. So essentially, you can move 5, use run through, attack them, and then move 2 more, giving you 7 move. I would say this is like here. I'd say it's good. Now, I would put it in strong, but it's on Swordmaster. So Swordmaster is a sword-locked class, so it only has access to swords, and there are generally better classes in terms of backups. Now, there are Swordmaster builds, like there's like Alacrity crit builds that some people run. I'm aware of those, but I feel like that could be run on most things. Swordmaster doesn't have like unique access to an Alacrity sword crit build, so I don't really think that Swordmaster doesn't have a monopoly on that. Other things can run that. Swordmaster doesn't increase your crit rate, right? It just increases certain growths. So other fast classes could run something similar and potentially even just be better. So you could probably run like a crit Griffin or a crit Wyvern. Like there's different things that can run crits that are better frames, that have better average damage. So I would say just good. Pass. Thief. Foes do not block units' movement. So Thief, I have a decent amount of experience running Thieves. Some people love to run them. They run them all the time. Like they run them in all of their runs, which sounds funny. Personally, I'm not a huge fan of Thief. Like I understand how to use it. You throw it on avoid tiles or use Corrin. I think there are better uses of Corrin than Thief. And the other, like there's a few problems with Thief. One of them is that if there's an enemy mystic, if it hits you, very often it can kill you or just deal really high damage. There's also the issue of enemies not attacking the Thief. But Pass, allowing you to move through foes. Like the thing is, how often are you going to be doing this? Like this is one of these things where in this game you can't really dive that well, right? Like you can kind of dive, you have to find opportunities to dive. I would say this is like better than run through maybe. Well, maybe not, because it doesn't give you movement. I would say it's like slightly worse than run through. Because in most use cases, a Thief is like a sentry gun. You put it on an avoid tile and then it tanks. So it doesn't really move much. So being able to move through enemies, while it is useful in some ways, it's not like this game favors attacking. I would say this game heavily favors like slow strategies, like very enemy phase builds. Most of the effective builds in this game are enemy phase builds. There are effective player phase builds, but you have to be able to survive the enemy density after killing the enemies. There are a few maps, like a lot of the middle game maps, you can be aggressive, and then end game maps kind of force you to dive small groups of enemies and then turtle large groups of enemies, then dive another small group of enemies, turtle another large group of enemies. So it's very much like a push and pull where you're constantly attacking and then turtling, attacking and turtling simultaneously. So being able to move through things isn't really super useful. I mean, it can be situationally if you want to run like Halberdier or something, but there's better classes for sure. I don't think Halberdier is optimal at all. It's just fun. So being able to move through things, while in theory is good, you're on a 4 or a 5 movement unit, and you're generally going to be trying to sit in some kind of avoid tile and generally lay like a trap. There's very few like aggressive Thief builds as far as I can tell. Most of them rely on avoid tanking. So like I don't know of a Thief build that just like dives in and starts killing things. Like how does it survive? It would need like bonded shield. It would need some kind of outside help. So getting through an enemy, like you can just make a hole easily too. So if there's a bunch of enemies that make a wall, you can just kill one of them and then get access to like their flank and behind them, which doesn't have a strategic advantage in terms of like hit rates or crits or anything like that. It's not triangle strategy, but it does allow you to easily get through enemy formations if you just punch a hole through them. But there's also, I don't think it's that good. It's just decent. I think Thief usually just sits there and counterattacks, to be honest. All right, Luna. I would say this is like a little bit better than Sandstorm. Not in terms of damage. Sandstorm is more damage, but Luna Alchrist has naturally insane dex growth, and generally it'll trigger a little bit more often. I would say between the units, like Chimera and Alchrist, they're both very similar. They require some investment to get them triggering consistently, but once they do, they can become very powerful units. But this is definitely one of the better abilities. I would rather have, honestly, after playing the game, I'm on my like 7th Maddening run, I would rather have Brave Assist. Because like you do have to kind of power level Alchrist and like overinvest in his upgrade, like his equipment to some degree. And he needs like specific things. That's not to say that he's a bad unit, but I would rather just have like Gold Mary be on the team than Alchrist if I had to choose, because she can tank, and tanking on enemy phase is very important. So that's just a preference, though. He's obviously a very strong unit. But yeah, all right, Ignis on Vidam. So this particular ability, oh yeah, so I didn't say what Luna does. Luna, all right, so when making an attack, ignore half of foe's defense/res. Trigger percent equals dex. So that's what Luna does. So basically ignores half of their defense or res. All right, Vidam, Ignis, during combat may add half of strength to magic damage or half of magic to all other damage. Triggers percent equals dex. So another dex damage trigger. I would say this one's a little bit worse than Sandstorm. All right, so why is that? Her dex, Salene's dex growth isn't as high, and her base dex isn't that high, so the trigger rate, I think it actually caps out on her personal class, which is the only way you get it. So yeah, it's like her dex is not the best, so it's not going to be triggered. It still hits like 20, 25 dex, roughly speaking, so it's still pretty high. But I've had a Chimera that had 45 dex and an Alchrist that had like 45 dex easily as I was in the end game. And that's crazy. Like 45% chance of Sandstorm or Luna is crazy. So she's not going to be competing with them at that level. But if you play the averages game, she's just increasing her damage on average. And she's not as good as Ivy, for sure. And the damage from Void Grasp is pretty crazy. It's way higher than this, for sure. If you're hitting, most enemy bosses, they have like decent magic stat for whatever reason, aside from maybe Marnie, who dies to magic easily anyways. But most bosses and most difficult enemies have at least a decent magic stat to scale her damage. So she tends to just hit really hard with everything. Merciless, Warrior, unit deals plus 50% damage against broken foes. This one, honestly, I would say it's low S tier. So everyone already knows Warrior is a good class, right? And if you combine this with Fracture, or if you combine this with like AoE Fracture, or even just common breaking, you can do some crazy nonsense. So if you fracture a worm and then hit it with like a tomahawk or a silver axe or whatever axe you want, you will definitely one round that thing. It won't counterattack you. So you basically just get to kill it for free. You just get to like execute it. So it also can combo off of AoE abilities. So for example, if you override a bunch of sword users on Sigurd with a lance, you break all the sword users, and then you can have, if you have like 2 to 3 warriors, just run in and clean up the damage easily. Even if it's for like low damage, like the override. So any AoE abilities that break, Great Aether, override. I think Roy's ability can break. I could be wrong on that because it's like a sword attack, so that could probably break axes. But anything that can break a foe combos with Merciless. And Warrior is already one of the better units in the game. It has good defensive stats, good strength growth, good health growth. It has access to axes and bows. So it has, heavy hitting, low accuracy axes combined with like low to medium damage, high accurate bows. It can also help shoot down flyers, and anything that's broken, it just has scale damage against. And it's like in general. So like if you attack a broken foe and you double or quad it, you have 50% bonus damage for all of your attacks. So these are worm killers, fracture worm killers easily. And then you can also pop Micaiah to AoE fracture multiple enemies, and then your warriors can make use of that. So definitely combos off of fracture and general breaking, even if the unit that's breaking the enemy is weak. So it enables a lot of nonsense. That's pretty good. So I'd say it's like low S tier. And it's also on one of the best classes in the game. So, all right, Hobble. Wolf Knight. If unit initiates combat with a knife, inflicts Munis? Move -2. That's me combining move and minus. Moonus. Alright. It inflicts Moonus -2. Move -2 on foe for 1 turn. So Hobble is decent. I would say it's like low A tier. It's good for one reason. If you can't kill an enemy flyer, and this is really the use case, or an enemy threat that has access to something it can kill, if you can reduce its movement, that's usually enough to save someone's life. So that can be good. Wolf Knight is a pretty decent class. I don't run it a ton, but I understand how it's good. But overall, like, it's not bad. I have used Hobble specifically to debuff something because, you know, some of my units were overextended and, you know, my Dancer was going to be able to get killed, but reducing the move by 2 did help. And then the enemy was forced to fight something that I could tank, that could tank it. So I would say it's like low A tier. Maybe a little bit better than that ability. All right, Air Raid, Wyvern Knight. So if unit initiates combat from a space a foe cannot enter, grants speed +5 during combat. So if you're on a flyer-only tile, it doesn't matter what it is or where it is, and the enemy is not a flyer, you get speed +5, including at 2 range. So if you have a javelin, if you have a Levin sword, if you have any kind of 2-range weapon, tomahawk, whatever, and you go to like a rock that's flyer only and attack an enemy at 2 range, you get +5 speed now. If you fly up, if you just sit over a river, over a lake, over a building that's flyers only, or even just like a weird angled tile that's like half water, half land, that's flyer only, and then an enemy attacks you, or I'm sorry, and you attack an enemy, you get speed +5. So Air Raid, honestly, I think is like here. I think it's one of the best abilities in the game. Speed +5, like if you have the same speed as the enemy, that allows you to double that enemy. So Air Raid takes even the slowest, like some of the slowest units, and allows them to either double or avoid getting doubled on attack. And if you put it on a fast unit and make use of it, you're looking at crazy doubling. And another thing about it that's nice too is speed +5 is also avoid +10. So if you trigger this, you're also increasing your dodge rate of enemy attacks by 10%, which, you know, over the grand scheme of things, consistently getting +10 dodge, if you play the averages game, will reduce you getting hit, but it also allows you to double way more consistently. And when you combo +10 avoid on, you know, fast units like Chloe, that stacks, you know, so you're looking at like crazy avoid rates and super consistent doubling if you make use of this. And there are a lot of tiles that allow you to make use of this, arguably increasing the skill ceiling of using Wyverns by quite a bit, because just positioning. Honestly, I wish more classes were like this. I love Pincer Attack. I love Merciless. I love Air Raid. This is not his passive, but his passive that heals is cool. I like things that reward you for positioning. I feel like that adds an extra element to the game. So Air Raid, when used properly, is crazy as hell and will just allow you to one round most things, or at the very least do like 70 to 80% damage to them, so they end up with almost no health after the Air Raid. It's a very powerful ability on one of the best classes. So the funny thing is, most of these also happen to be on some of the best classes, and that's not an accident. Like, some of these do help push these classes up. Warrior, even without Merciless, is still really good, but with Merciless, it allows you to one-round worms that you break, which is crazy. Pretty consistently, too. Like, I've had Panette just walk up to a thing and like a worm and throw tomahawks at it, and she'll double it on Warrior with Tomahawk, and she'll put it at like 20% health. So if you just fracture it, she'll just kill it now. It's crazy. So it's definitely up there. Then Chaos Style, everyone knows, is crazy. So like speed increases, damage increase, speed increase, utility, damage increase. So it's kind of obvious. And then, you know, damage increase, damage increase, damage increase, damage increase, damage increase, movement debuff. This one I'm not even really so sure about, but I'll put it here just because it's still, it's in a way, you know, emblem output increases. Now the difference between these two, like, is this really worse than this? I think Alir is a better unit than Veil in general, and by the time you get Veil, your Alir is going to be built with engraved weapons, passives, and everything. So, yeah, I think this is slightly better. it just, so like if you think about it in terms of, I mean, they're basically the same thing in a way, because like as soon as her turn starts, she gets one. But this is on a better unit, I think. I think it's fair to say Alir is a much better unit than Veil, so that factors in, right? So like if Wolf Knight was a terrible class, this wouldn't be as good. Sage is a good class, but this is kind of hard to set up. But here is the list. A lot of these do factor in, like, you know, Berserker's a bad class, and this doesn't really matter, so that's D tier. Cupido, I think he's actually better off on Warrior, to be honest. It's a better passive. Like 50% more damage against Broken, that's just better. So yeah, that's it for this list. Some of these might change as I do more playthroughs. We'll see, but here is where it is now. If you agree or disagree with any of these, let me know. And definitely like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.